He is clearly absolutely livid, and I love that because that shows the fight. He's not giving this up anytime soon. There is going to be a real McLaren battle on, and I, for one, am absolutely loving that. Hello everybody, welcome back to The Fast and the Curious. This is our Silverstone Grand Prix debrief, and what a race that was. I'm Betty Glover alongside Christian Hugel, who is there. And by the way, I would just like to take a moment to say thank you to the British weather for delivering once again. Silverstone was sprinkled with so much rain, it made for an absolutely epic Grand Prix, didn't it, Christian?
Oh, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And I sort of have these mixed feelings with the British weather because I'm like, oh, for goodness sake, it would be nice to go to Silverstone one year and be like, oh, it's beautiful. Oh, I've got a tan. Yeah. Oh, I'm seeing everybody in shorts and t-shirts. But then the race starts and you're like, oh, but this is quite good fun, isn't it? So, yeah, I have real mixed feelings on the weather. And I've sort of got to the end. Betty, you weren't around last year because you were in America, were you? Australia, thank you. You're such a jet setter. I forget where you are, darling.
Oh, it's a hard life, isn't it?
You were in Australia, but it rained all weekend. So at least it's a nice balance this year. The fans have had a little bit of not wall-to-wall rain, a bit of shelter, but we also got that sprinkle of weather, as you say, to make it a phenomenal Grand Prix. A phenomenal Grand Prix, which was won by a Brit. Lando Norris won the British Grand Prix, Betty Glover. Would you like to take us through the top 10?
Yes, so 5 drivers didn't actually finish. It was absolute carnage out there, wasn't it? Here's the top 10 though. Lando Norris, his first ever win at Silverstone, absolutely massive. Oscar Piastri's misjudgment, I guess that's what we'll call it, means that despite being in full control of the race, he finished second. The big story of the day, though, possibly taking over from Lando's win, is Nico Hulkenberg. After 239 races, finally got his podium. That's just mad. Lewis Hamilton 4th, Max Verstappen 5th, Pierre Gasly 6th, Lance Stroll came 7th, Alex Albon took 8th, Fernando Alonso 9th, and George Russell took 10th. Lando, Christian, now 8 points behind Oscar. That, everybody, is game on.
It's game on, and we've got a lot to talk about, not least Oscar's penalty, which we'll get onto. But it was one of those where the gap between them this weekend was so small. And I think it was telling that after qualifying, obviously Oscar out-qualified Lando, but Lando turned around and said, well, listen, I'm quite pleased with today. The gaps were tiny, absolutely tiny. You know, either of the McLarens could have been on pole. Lewis could have been on pole had he had not made a mistake deep into the final sector. So there was nothing between these guys today. And it came down to, Oscar in that first stint in the changeable conditions. There is no doubt Oscar was the quicker of the two McLarens. But it ultimately came down to keeping it clean and that penalty, which is proving really controversial here. Yeah. Really controversial. Betty, this is a role reversal. I'm really interested to know what you think before I say what I thought.
Firstly, I watched this at home. So I was at Silverstone a bit this weekend, but watched the race at home. And I'm so pleased that I did, which might sound a little bit controversial in itself. But there was so much going on and it was so bloody confusing that I was like, do you know what? Thank God I've got a TV in front of me. I don't know how people in the stands coped with that on that Oscar 10-second penalty. He's clearly incredibly upset about it. Was it fair? I think it probably was, wasn't it? Because if you look at the brake pressure, 60 PSI, that's double what George got in Canada. So if you're comparing it to that, I mean, the weather was absolutely terrible. I don't know. I think it was probably fair, but I can understand why he's frustrated. What do you think?
I agree with your analysis. I think it was a fair penalty, I have to say. I think it's very, 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 very harsh in one sense because it's a small mistake. The safety car was ending. The conditions were really tricky. So in many ways, it's a harsh penalty. But I think if I'm looking at this in the cold light of day, we get on well with Oscar on this podcast. But if I'm looking at this in the cold light of day, I think it was a too harsher reduction in speed. I think he knocked off too much speed in a short space of time. I think it could have caused a collision. You heard Nico Hulkenberg say in the cool-down room. How good's that to say? Nico in the cool-down room. Oh, yeah. You heard Nico in the cool-down room say, yeah, it did send ramifications down the pack. I think it's a hard lesson to learn. But ultimately, I think it was the right call. I really do. And I think Lando won this race today by keeping it clean and keeping it on the track. And you make your own luck in motorsport.
If it had been dry, if the weather hadn't been as wet as it was, would have been okay?
What, to brake as much as he
Yeah.
did?
Would he have had a penalty like that?
Very difficult to say, because ifs, buts and maybes, would he have needed to brake that much if that was the case? It's very, very difficult to say. I think we're getting too much into hypotheticals there. I think you do, in any sort of motor race, have to adjust your driving to the conditions. And I do think it was a too harsh reduction in speed. Others will disagree. And listen, I understand if you disagree. I honestly do. It's not clear cut. Oscar was very much aggrieved. And also, if you're watching or listening to this around the world, you'll have either watched on F1 TV and Channel 4, who had Alex Jakes, David Coulthard and Jolyon Palmer on commentary, or you'll have been watching Sky's coverage where you had David Croft and Martin Brundle on commentary.
And they all said it was fair.
Well, Crofty and Brundle said it was fair. From what I've heard, I was watching with Sky coverage over on F1 TV. They said it was unfair. And all of these people know about motor racing, and they're splitting an opinion, which I think sums it up. I've been critical of the FIA in the past on this podcast for decisions they've made in terms of stewarding. I can't be critical here. It's a difficult call to make. It's borderline. For me, it's the right decision. There will be people who disagree with that. And listen, it's hard to get cross about that for me. I think it was probably the right call.
I would have liked to have seen 5 seconds, not 10. 10's a lot.
Mate, I have to admit, the thought crossed my mind, actually. The thought crossed my mind during the race. So, yeah, I maybe see what you mean there. But, yeah, listen, it's really tricky for Oscar. Who knows? Martin Brundle said whether when he sees the data, will he have a different opinion? Let's see.
Yeah, I don't know whether when he has time to just settle down a little bit, get the adrenaline out of his system, talk to the team. I think maybe then he might calm down slightly, might be able to reflect on it in a little bit of a different way. And fair play to him, he was clearly absolutely livid and he refused to comment on it, which was definitely the right thing to do, because you could just tell he was so angry.
It was very, very classy, as you'd expect from Oscar Piastri. And of course, you'd expect that from Oscar Piastri. He epitomises class. The way he went, despite these feelings, we know how cool he is, and yet we're seeing him as cross as he's ever been. Despite that, he goes over to Lando Norris and immediately says, well done. That is classy. And he didn't get into it with Jenson Button. You know, he says, I'm going to keep my cool here. Very, very classy response. There's a reason these drivers are allowed to race. It's because they handled themselves very, very well. Oscar has had an excellent weekend. Beat his teammate in qualifying. Did the better job in the first stint of these two McLaren drivers. His race engineer, Tom Stallard, who he has a great relationship with. I'm sure Tom and Oscar's team around him will sit and talk him through just how many positives there are over this weekend. It was a great weekend for Oscar Piastri. He's been harshly punished for what I view to be a small mistake. But that is motor racing, unfortunately. This is the most tough sport in the world, for a reason.
I am gutted for him, though, because he was racing so well. He was driving so well. He was absolutely smashing it. He looked fantastic. And then that happens. And oh my God, we had about 1,000,001 safety cars. It was stop, start, stop, start. It just must be so incredibly frustrating as a driver, driving in those conditions and with all of that happening as well.
Betty, it's also mentally challenging. The mental challenge for them of stop, start, of the changing conditions. This is where these guys really, really earn their money. It's incredible. This is why they're world-class athletes. And on that, a word for Lando Norris, because he kept his cool. I think over the course of the weekend, it might be one of those where you can look and say Oscar had the narrowest of overall pace margins, but Lando was Mr. Consistency over the weekend. He didn't really put a foot wrong. He only had a slight mistake towards the end of the lap in Q3, which probably cost him that place to his teammate, maybe even pole position. But in the race, we saw Oscar have an off. He kept it on the track. And as someone else who we'll get on to talk about proved, in races like this, if you can keep it on the track, you might well be onto a winner here. And I think Lando, look, he got a slice of luck, but he deserves that luck. a wonderful, wonderful result from Lando Norris. And seeing the scenes at the end, I didn't fully cry like last year, Betty, but I got a bit emotional. I really did. I'm just delighted for Lando. He deserves this home win. And my goodness me, title on, everyone. Title bloody well on.
I know, fasten your seatbelts, guys, because it is happening. I got emotional listening to Lando on the radio because you could just tell how much it meant to him. And look, as a little boy, that's the moment that he will have been dreaming of. Winning Silverstone, that is, for him, that is absolutely massive. But first win in front of home fans, first win at Silverstone, back-to-back wins as well, going into this little halfway break. This is going to do a lot for him in terms of confidence, isn't it? And that title challenge. He needed this, didn't he?
Yeah, and do you know what? I've seen a bit of a change in Lando Norris, I think. Right since he made that big mistake in Canada, where he obviously crashed into the back of Oscar, we've seen Lando beat himself up too harshly in the past. Something we actually saw a bit from Charles Leclerc this weekend. Charles had an awful weekend. And part of that was him beating himself up too much. He, after qualifying, we heard him giving himself too much stick on the radio. You can be too harsh on yourself. We've seen Lando do that in the past. We've seen Charles do that in the past. Charles fell into an old habit this weekend. We've not seen any of that from Lando recently. He's been Mr. Cool. He's been Mr. Calm. He's been Mr. Collected. I think we've seen Lando level up off track as well as on track this season. I think we've seen a new calmness about Lando because dealing with that pressure as a Formula One driver is absolutely massive. We had Simon Lazenby, the Sky Sports presenter, on the other week, who's written a whole book about pressure. That's how important it is. And I think we're seeing Lando soak up that pressure better. He's always had ability on track. He's always had speed, but has he always been able to soak up the pressure, keep it cool? Well, we're seeing that he can. So I think he goes into the second half of the championship having improved his demeanour, having improved his off-track aura. The speed is still there. He seems more comfortable with the McLaren over the last 2 Grand Prix that he's now won than he has done in the earlier Grand Prix. So I think Lando's going into a really good place. And Oscar's not going anywhere. As I said earlier, he'll bounce back.
Yeah,
he's had such raw speed and we know how calm he is. They're both dealing with the pressure well. They're both dealing with the fight well. They've both got the raw speed. They're both world championship winning material.
That reminds me, I'm actually really pleased to see this reaction from Oscar as well, because he could have easily have just been like, okay, whatever, can't come second. That's really annoying, but well done. He is clearly absolutely livid. And I love that because that shows the fight. He's not giving this up anytime soon. There is going to be a real McLaren battle on. And I, for one, am absolutely loving that. Do you love that?
Oh, absolutely love it. And you're right, mate. It's going to run and run and run till the end of the season. And we're going to have a little bit of a break now before the next race. Then we're going to have a summer break. And it is going to feel so long until this Formula One season comes back. Because then when we're back off the summer break, the races come thick and fast right the way up until December. And this title is going to ebb and flow. You're going to have more weekends where Oscar looks the better one. You're going to have more weekends where, like last weekend, Lando looks the better of the two. Max is out of this title race. It's Max is not going to win this title. Unbelievable qualifying session from him that proved why Mercedes are sort of trying to go after his signature, because I don't believe there's another driver on the grid that could have put the car on pole. His qualifying setup made it trickier for the race. The low downforce setup that meant he had good straight line speed, but didn't have as good grip in the corners, really was tricky in lower grip, wet conditions. And therefore, even Max couldn't do anything with that car in the race. And we saw how much he struggled. So Max is out of this title battle. This is going to be a McLaren battle for the title right until the end. And I, for one, can't bloody wait.
Oh, me too. Right, we're going to take a very quick break. When we're back, we've got to talk about the one and only Nico Hulkenberg.
Hulken chat after the break.
Before we get back to this episode, if you've been enjoying the Fast and the Curious, listening to the drivers and thinking, do you know what? I want to have a bit of that. I want to go to a Grand Prix. Then we have got the perfect thing for you, haven't we, Christian?
And those perfect things are Gulliver's Travel. They're not things, they're lovely people. Gulliver's Travel sort out all the faff of going to a Grand Prix. So if you decide, I want to go to a Formula One race, but I want to focus purely on enjoying and soaking up the atmosphere, Gulliver's Travel will sort out all the faff and logistics so you can just focus on having a nice time. It's wonderful.
They sort out literally everything. Flights, hotels. When you're there, you're going to have a Gulliver's Travel person with you to help you through everything. And you've been looking at the website.
I've been looking at the website, and I like the fact they have people that help you get to the track as well. That's the bit where I always go wrong. You get to your hotel and you think, oh, this is fantastic. Then you wake up the following morning like, I actually need to get to the Formula One place, and that stresses me out. But I've been looking on the website, and they have fantastic packages for Qatar, because that's one of those places where I'd be like, I have no idea how to get to Qatar.
Well, that is in November, but you're being incredibly organised for yourself by looking at that already.
Gotta be organised. Formula One is all about the fine margins and the detail. So if you want to get yourself organised and look for races in the future like Qatar, head to the Gulliver's Travel website. It is gulliverstravel.co.uk. They've got all sorts of packages, and you can customise packages to suit you by just giving the lovely people a ring, and they will help you out in whatever way that you need.
Guys, get on it. Right, back to the podcast. Welcome back. This is the Silverstone Debrief with Betty Glover and Christian Hugill. Now, I know everyone would have loved to have seen Lewis Hamilton on that Silverstone podium again, but I don't think anyone can be upset that Hulkenberg got on that podium. It's taken him 239 races. That's 5,593 days in Formula One, but he finally got there. He finally experienced it. That's the moment for me from Silverstone. Incredible.
Is it? What? That's your moment over Lando winning?
Yes, 100%. I love Lando winning, don't get me wrong, but honestly, Nico Hulkenberg getting on the podium completely overthrows Lando's story, I think.
Does it? Bold from you.
That's no shade on Lando. Love Lando. What an achievement. Brilliant. But the thing that really got to me was Nico Hulkenberg.
That's Glover's story of the weekend, is it? The Hulken podium.
Yes! 239th Grand Prix.
Yeah.
He'd never made a podium before. Now he's done it.
Big call, but you'll be far from on your own. I think actually to praise Nico, I want to first praise Lewis, because it's been Lewis's best weekend in a Ferrari for me, comfortably. Lewis was absolutely brilliant. He levelled up this weekend, just like he did at Silverstone last year. You know, there is something about this place that levels up Lewis. He was comfortably the best Ferrari all weekend. Comfortably. Real bad weekend for Charles Leclerc. Real good weekend for Lewis Hamilton. And I was thinking, at one stage it looked inevitable. At one stage it looked absolutely inevitable. Lewis Hamilton is going to get his first Ferrari podium here at Silverstone. And yet, what odds would you have got if you're a betting man, which I'm not, on Nico Hulkenberg being the one to take it away from him? But I wrote down on lap 2, Nico Hulkenberg had made up 8 places at the start as people pitted, thinking we'll make a very, very early change in tyres. As people slid wide, Hulk made up 8 places on the first lap. And I wrote that down and circled it and thought, that's handy, isn't it? From 19th on the grid, I think he started, Hulkenberg.
Yeah.
I could have that wrong. I don't have my notes in front of me, but unbelievable. And listen, I can sit here today and say Nico drove a great race. He kept it on the track. That's what experienced drivers do. How often do people like me say in wet conditions, just keep it on the track? Sauber, huge credit to them. Yes, they made all the right calls and when to bringing him. That's why he got a podium today, right? He kept it on the track. Sauber made all the right calls strategy-wise. Great experienced driver. That's why they got the podium today. But more importantly, this is a driver who has long had the ability to score podium places, but highly unfortunately, and it is really unfortunate, is a driver that hasn't found himself in a car capable of fighting for podiums. Most people in Formula One, when they show that potential, get a chance eventually. Look at when Sergio Perez won for Racing Points, or I think, they were Racing Points at the time. You know, Red Bull took notice and deservedly gave Checo that seat. That's never quite happened for Nico Hulkenberg, and I think that's really unlucky. This ability, this performance has been in him for a long, long while, and he has been so unlucky. So I'm so glad and delighted for him that he got this podium today. It is thoroughly deserved, not just today. This is not a one-off freak great performance from Nico Hulkenberg. This is a performance that's been in his locker for his F1 career. I'm delighted for him.
Delighted for him, and credit to him as well. But I wonder how much credit we need to give to Jonathan Wheatley as well. Because since he's joined Sauber, it just really feels like everything he's doing is just right.
I'm so glad you've just said that. I've actually got intel on that. I was at Sauber and spent a bit of time with them the last race I went to, which was Canada, wasn't it? They're all merging into one. Yes, it was Canada. And I was speaking to some of the team, and they said the calming influence he's had, the directional influence he's had. They all know which hymn sheet they're singing from. They all know which direction they're pushing in. There's much more of a sense of clarity. Him and Matteo Binotto are starting to, that project in going into Audi was going off the rails. It wasn't good. They were the slowest car by a mile last season. And Binotto and Wheatley as a double act are really moving that project in the right direction. So huge credit to Sauber, who have made big strides forward this year. You're absolutely right, Betty. Huge credit to Jonathan Wheatley. Thank you to my friend Alex Griffiths, who loved Kamui Kobayashi when he was racing. Bit of a cult hero, Japanese driver. And Alex took great pleasure in pointing out to me that it's Sauber's first podium since Kamui Kobayashi in 2012 at the Japanese Grand Prix. Yeah. Big result for Sauber. And they are starting to show themselves as challengers for the midfield for the Constructors' Championship. Absolutely amazing from Sauber and from Nico.
Yeah, I wonder, Jonathan Wheatley just taking all of the stuff that he's learned from Red Bull and just injecting that into Sauber.
So I watched the race. I'll be honest with you, I normally watch the race in the office where I work for F1 Explains and watch the race in there. It was a bit packed today. So I went to watch the race in McLaren. Thank you for McLaren for looking after me. After the race, text you, Betty, said, right, I'll go and get my kit. We'll do a podcast. Was going to get my kit to leave the paddock to go and do the podcast. And popped to the loo next to our office. Popped into the loo. And who is in the loo on his own, seconds after his first ever podium? It's Nico Hulkenberg. And it's incredible. Like, Nico, I can't. Now, obviously some of the drivers I know better than others. Some of the drivers I talk to better than others. I have interviewed Nico Hulkenberg in the past, but he won't have the foggiest idea who I am. So I just said, but I can't not. So I just said, congratulations, Nico. And he went, as he was doing his race suit back up, he just went, thanks, man.
Oh, God.
What a legend.
So were you next to each other in the urinals?
No. I walked in as he was leaving, and So there wasn't that awkwardness. It was post. He'd done a wee. He'd done his wee. It was fine. But yes, big smile from Nico. He just looked so chilled. But I was like, he's just on his own in the loo, seconds after his first podium, before going into the press conference, and just happened to, it just happened to pop into the toilet that we used next to our office. And there he was, Nico Hulkenberg, everybody.
I bet he was honoured that you were the first person that he saw whilst he was going for his post-first podium pee. So,
oh my God, I saw Nico Hulkenberg do his first loo session as a Formula One podium finisher.
Post-podium pee. That's what they do. Thank God it wasn't a post-podium poo, because then that would have been awkward.
He'd have delayed the press conference. TC would have been waiting for him.
Would have been waiting a while. By the way, I saw this on social media. The last two times that Lewis Hamilton didn't make the podium at Silverstone was 2013, his first season with Mercedes, and 2025, his first season with Ferrari. It's
not coincidence, because he's had an amazing weekend. Like, he'll be upset. I've not seen any of his post-race interviews yet. But I would imagine he would be delighted with his Silverstone weekend, even if he'll be a bit upset not to be on the podium, because there is something about him at this track. He just levels up. We've seen a supercharged Lewis Hamilton this weekend. I don't know whether it's the circuit. I was speaking to somebody in the paddock who said to me that they think some of Ferrari's minor upgrades they bought have had a positive effect. Said person in the paddock also told me that this is a track that suits Ferrari a little bit more than others.
Right.
So, that explains some of the performance. But Lewis has been supercharged this weekend. He's had a really, really good weekend. And I think he'll be really pleased. So, yes, he didn't get a podium today, but he was the best Ferrari. So, again, I think, Betty, you know what we were saying about Lando, about he's going after this race being like, you know what, that was pretty good. I think this will give him real encouragement, shall we say, for the sort of second half of the season. A little bit of a reminder of, I am still Lewis Hamilton. I can still do this. I've been really impressed with Lewis this weekend. And oh my word, the crowd, my dad and brother are here this weekend. So as I was leaving the track, I went to see them for a drink as I was leaving the track Saturday. And Lewis was just about to be on the main stage and the crowds were unbelievable. Of course, Lando is the sort of golden boy of particularly the younger generation of audience at Silverstone nowadays. But there is no doubt whatsoever that Lewis Hamilton is such a legend here. The warmth from him from the crowd's been unbelievable.
Oh, do you know what? Even Lewis was like, I don't think he meant it as a dig at all, but he did say the other day, he was like, oh, it's so nice to see how much red there is in the crowd still. It's so nice to see all of the red.
I said last year to Greg, because obviously, as we said earlier, Betty, you missed Silverstone last year, but me and Greg were saying last year, it'll be fascinating.
Me, please.
Sorry. Well, I didn't want people to think I was excluding you by saying I spoke to Greg. There was a reason it was me and Greg in the conversation because you happened to be in Australia and it would have been, awkward to have rung you at that point. Me and Greg were saying... Betty, it's Christian and Greg. We're just saying, yeah. But anyway, we were saying, won't it be interesting to see how much red there is here next year? And there has definitely been an increase in red, but it's actually a testament to McLaren's popularity at the moment because papaya is still the dominant colour. And you'll have seen this when you were here with us on Thursday, Betty. There is so much love and warmth for Oscar and Lando. But Lewis had a fantastic weekend. It's not a coincidence that he's been on the podium so much over the years because he is unbelievable around here.
I know you're saying that Lewis will walk away and be happy with his weekend, and I'm sure he will. But if you were a Ferrari fan, you would just be so disappointed because it really did feel like this was a race where Ferrari should have gotten a podium, whether that was Hamilton or Charles Leclerc. Yeah,
well, they had good pace on Friday and everyone was saying, hello, where's this pace coming from? And then, as I said, my said paddock source, so I won't reveal, I sort of said to them, was it this morning or yesterday morning? Again, I am quite tired. The days blur into one. Whenever I had this chat with the person in the paddock, I said, is this pace real? And they sort of went, I actually think it is. For the reasons I've said, minor upgrades and the track. So yes, actually, you make a really valid point, mate, that they having said that, I'm talking rubbish. No, they will have wanted to be on the podium. The way the race panned out, this is still a tricky car to drive. They haven't solved all of their problems overnight. And Lewis said on the team radio, it's snappy. With that in mind, there'll be a mix of Lewis's performance was good. He'll be pleased with that. But, the fact that Lewis was struggling with it so much shows you. And again, Nico was finding his Sauber more easy to drive than Lewis was. So there will be conflicting emotions there. Ferrari have still got work to do. Lewis, personally, I believe, has had a good weekend. I think he'll be disappointed not to have got on the podium, but he found that car a bit too tricky to handle in the second part of this race in particular.
Yeah, this race, I wonder if it was also, the conditions just looked so horrifically bad at most of the time during that race. Drivers couldn't even see. Charles Leclerc had water in his visor, for God's sake.
Must have been the water. Must have been the water.
It must have been the water. But
Thank you, Brian.
This is a race to forget, isn't it? For some of the big names like Max Verstappen, he was so unhappy. Charles Leclerc, they're not going to want to relive that race anytime soon.
There was a few people saying to me after I did an Instagram and TikTok post where I was saying that, look, that's the reason why Max is wanted by Mercedes because of look at what he can do. And there were people saying to me, oh no, the Red Bull's still the quickest car. No, it isn't. No, it's absolutely. There were people in my comments being like, oh yeah, fastest driver puts fastest car on pole. No, the Red Bull is not the fastest car. It's hard to handle. It's just not as fast. So no, Max had a great qualifying, but as I said earlier in the pod, his strategy compromised him for the race. Charles had his worst weekend for a long while post Friday. He didn't have a good qualifying, didn't have a good race weekend to forget. Yuki Tsunoda continues to have an absolute nightmare in the second Red Bull. Goodness knows what they're going to do about that. So you're absolutely right. And Mercedes, a very scrappy weekend for them. I don't think they got their strategy right today at all. Certainly one to forget for Mercedes.
Also, one to forget for most of the rookies, Silverstone was just claiming them all. He was just like, boom, 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 boom. The only rookie that finished, Ollie Behrman. Fair play, mate.
Yeah, fair play to Ollie. We thank him so much for coming on the podcast on Thursday. And we should say as well, shouldn't we, Betty? Thank you to anyone who turned up to watch us at Silverstone on Thursday. You know, an amazing crowd. We had an amazing time. A real up and down British Grand Prix weekend for Ollie Behrman. He, on Thursday, said to us he'd sing if he got in the points. And actually, he had a qualifying where he could have got in the points. And it sort of sums up his season, Ollie. An amazing qualifying, where he really shows his pace and sticks it in the top 10, but some rookie mistakes. I've only seen it once. I might be being harsh. I don't think I am. You know, a mistake in the race where he went in too hot and bashed into his teammate. That doesn't go down well within a team. That does not go down well within a team. And I thought he was harshly treated when he got his last red flag penalty, but this one I don't think was harsh, or he didn't slow down enough under the red flag. Ollie's showing real flashes of speed and potential. I'm not worried about him at all. He just needs to soften the rough edges of his rookie season by bringing a bit more calmness and consistency to his driving, because the speed is there. And Aya Komatsu said to me when I interviewed him on Friday that sometimes he can get a bit overexcited. And I think you've seen that with Ollie this weekend. He just needs to cool it just that little bit. I still think we'll see many more Ollie Behrman performances at the British Grand Prix. I still think he's a talent. I still think he'll be fine. I would just like to see from him in the second half of the season smoothing out. Smoothing? I don't think that's a word. Smoothing. Thank you. Smoothing. If you're listening to The Fast and the Curious, smoothing out the rough edges is what I'd like to see from Ollie in the second half of this season. And there's a reason so many of the rookies struggled, Betty Glover, because this are the conditions where these drivers earn their money. It is bloody tricky out there. And it's one of those, as the Hulk podium proved, as Lewis's good performance proved, a bit of experience goes a long way in these conditions.
But I know you're talking about Ollie Behrman there and some of the negatives, but I do think he can take positives from the fact that he was the only rookie to finish the race. In those conditions. Fair play.
Yeah. Absolutely. And some positives from his general speed as well. Completely agree with you. There are positives and negatives to take from Ollie's weekend.
Did you manage to pick up on any good radio radars?
No, I didn't. Did you? No, we've not discussed this. Oh, by the way, tell you what we need to...
Don't. I know what you're going to say. I was absolutely livid.
We came off air. We literally finished recording the podcast last week. And then we got all the notifications about the glaring one. What did Oscar say?
Something like Alpine still manages to find a way to fuck me over all these years later.
That wasn't on the feed, so on the live pictures. So, yeah, oh, goodness me, yeah. But anyway, no, I didn't pick out any glaringly obvious ones, but... there was at some point over the weekend, there was another Leclerc one, which I enjoyed. Yeah. I just like at any point where he calls his race engineer Brian. It's just brilliant. Even though that is his name, it just makes it funnier. Betty, how about you?
Yeah, so there was one where he went, Brian, why are you asking me all these questions?
Stop questioning me, Brian.
Stop questioning me. George Russell, well, I've probably missed quite a lot, to be fair, because there was so much going on. It's really hard. But George Russell... one of my favourites, because he just went, it's raining. Brilliant. Every British person living in the UK absolutely felt that. You've
nailed that, yeah, because they'd done the early pit stop gamble. Yeah, you've nailed that, Betty. That's exactly that. It was a really good one.
Alonso, he was getting frustrated, wasn't he? All the people that we've lost places to, they all have worse tyres, or do we just lose places for fun? Anything. When a driver is getting sassy, I'm just like, brilliant. There was also really good Charles Leclerc. I just think he went on an absolute rant, didn't he? What did he say?
Oh, what? I hate myself, I'm stupid, or whatever it was. Is that the one you mean on the Saturday?
Yeah. And then, that one where he hates himself. And then there was also that there's water that came into my visor. I couldn't see anything like a huge splash of water. Yes.
Must be the water, Charles. Must be the water.
Must be the water. So yeah, there we go. There's our radio radar. Is there anything else you want to say, Christian? Anything that's caught your fancy?
I'm not going to do a Christian's cubbyhole as such this weekend. Instead, I'm just going to say thank you, because obviously, Betty, we were all there together as a gang on Thursday. We did our pre-race show on the main stage. We obviously, Betty, me and you went to Williams on Wednesday and spoke to James, Jensen and Alex. Betty, I've been lucky enough to stick around for the rest of the weekend. I've just felt, and Betty, I'm sure you're the same, felt so much warmth for the podcast on British Grand Prix week. And I think, Betty, we should have a bit of honesty here. This podcast isn't any of our jobs, right? But Greg is really, really busy doing the Radio 1 breakfast show. He does a cricket podcast for the BBC. You know, for those that don't know, Betty, you're a sports broadcaster. You travel all over the world, all over the country. I have an actual job in Formula 1, making a podcast for F1. The Fast and the Curious is a side hustle for us. It's a passion project. It's something we're trying to build into a nice thing that we hope will be around for many years to come. And the fact that so many people have get behind us and say nice things and come up to us and say how much they're enjoying the podcast, it's really touched me this weekend. It's so lovely. To every single person who's come up and said hello this weekend, thank you so much. And as we all do this on the side. We're all busy. Yeah. We all do this to do a nice F1 fun thing that we want the drivers to enjoy, that we want to enjoy. So your support in buying the merch helps the podcast carry on long term. Your support in coming to see us for live shows and clicking on our stuff. Thank you. It really makes a difference, and we're really grateful.
I couldn't have said it any better. Thank you very much, everybody. Also, there was one fan that asked us for a photo, but I ran away because I needed to go and buy deodorant on Wednesday.
Oh, this was so funny.
For that guy.
Hang on. No, you've not done this story justice. So Betty arrives on Wednesday at Williams in Piccadilly Circus. Yeah. And in true Betty fashion says to me, I need to buy deodorant. And it's like, okay, fine, we'll go to Boots, because there's a big Boots, a very good Boots as well at Piccadilly Circus.
I just forgot.
Yeah, mate, happens to the best of us. So Betty's so determined to go to Boots. Like, we'll go to Boots. We left the office bit, and this lovely young lad comes up to us and goes, sees me and Betty, looks really excited and goes, can I have a picture? And Betty just looks at him, thinks that the guy's just asking me for a picture. And Betty goes, yeah, sure, I'm going to buy deodorant, and runs off. And the poor lad just did this. He went, oh, Betty just runs off and leaves him.
Do you know what? It's not worth anyone smelling me in that state. Do you know what I mean? Betty, underground isn't very forgiving.
Betty, we have an honest friendship, sometimes too honest. You know this. I'd have told you didn't smell. You were fine. You were absolutely okay.
I was on the brink. Anyway, thank you everybody that has supported us, that came to watch us on Thursday. It was brilliant. We had such good fun. Oh, go on.
I've got news before you go. Were you launching into the full end of the podcast?
Yes, I was wrapping it up.
I've got news. I've not even told you this or Greg, because it only happened today. Leah Block's coming on.
Oh, Leah Block. We love Leah Block.
We love Leah. We're going to do an interview with Leah, and we're going to put it out in either the summer break or one of the gaps in between races. So any questions for Williams F1 Academy driver Leah Block, please? We're at Fast Curious Pod on all the socials. The merch is obviously still going strong. Thank you for that. I forget the link. We'll put the link in the description of the episode. Buy a cap. So yeah, that's going to be seen. And we've also, I'm not going to say who yet because it'd be unfair, but I think we're 80% of the way to securing another driver who's not been on the pod before. That's very exciting. But yeah, questions for Leah Block, please. We'll do that very soon on the Fast and the Curious.
Love it. Well, I hope everyone copes okay with this little break from Formula One. We'll be back with an episode ahead of Spa. But as always, if any breaking news happens, I don't know, if anyone moves, if anyone moves teams,
Alpine, teams. I'm hearing it might not be looking good for Colapinto. It wouldn't surprise me to see Bottas or Doohan. Either one of them, I think, could be in that seat by Spa. They might pop up and talk about that.
For God's sake. Anyway, follow us on socials, subscribe to the podcast, because when we do pop up, you want to make sure you're subscribed, guys. We will see you later. Goodbye.
Bye.